Hi, and welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. I'm a retired 20-year veteran sergeant of the Los Angeles Police Department. I spent my entire 20-year career working in patrol within all four bureaus of the city of Los Angeles: Central Bureau, West Bureau, Valley Bureau, and South Bureau. I was also assigned to the infamous gang detail Operations South Bureau C.R.A.S.H. C.R.A.S.H being the acronym for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. Many of you who have been following me since day one know that I am not afraid or opposed to pulling the covers back, exposing that thin blue line, and speaking to you honestly and candidly about police culture, police training, and deciphering police code talk that companies speak that we hear from police chiefs when they have to try to explain away something that is really very difficult to justify. I'm also the author of an autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, which chronicles my career on the Los Angeles Police Department, as well as the advocacy work that I began to get involved in 2014 after publishing my first book in 2013. You know what happened in 2014. There were a spate of deadly police encounters, starting with Eric Garner, Mike Brown here in Los Angeles, Ezell Ford, and then everything else that followed. Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland and Rayshard Brooks and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and on and on and on. So I'll help you understand what it is that you can do to try to survive a police encounter. Holding court curbside will get you hurt, and I want to give you the tools and show you the red flags where an officer may be about to get aggressive with you. The goal being, at the end of that police encounter, for everyone to go home safely. And that's on both sides. Visit my website, CherylDorsey.com, that's CherylDorsey.com, and read the first chapter of my autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, as well as my next to be released book in the Black and Blue series, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Whistleblower. Also, those of you who've been following me for a while know I have a lot of isms. You know, your agreement is not required. And most recently, the one that was heard around the world, all skinfolk ain't kinfolk. I put those Cheryl Dorsey isms on t-shirts, crewneck shirts, and hoodies. Anyone interested in purchasing one of those items, you can do so at my website, CherylDorsey.com, as well. Now, let's get to it. Over in Columbus, Ohio, there's a police officer by the name of Adam Coy who fatally shot an unarmed black man, Andre Hill. Adam Coy is now being served with charges, and the police chief or the mayor or one or the other is recommending his termination. Officer Adam Coy had responded to a non-emergency call. He saw Andre Hill in an open garage. When Hill saw the police officer, he started to come out of the garage. He had a phone in his hand, and Officer Adam Coy immediately fired. According to authorities over there, they're saying, we have an officer who violated his oath to comply with the rules and policies of the Columbus Division of Police, and the consequences of that violation are so great that it requires immediate action. And so they are requesting, at least initially, there's talk of this officer Adam Coy being fired because it's a violation and it cost an innocent man his life, in quotes. It cost an innocent man his life. They're recommending immediate termination. They're kind of sidestepping all of the normal protocols involved in this type of an offense. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. The Columbus Division of Police have asserted that this officer, Adam Coy, violated 3 areas and committed critical misconduct. The areas are, Adam Coy used unreasonable use of deadly force. He failed to activate his body-worn camera. Oh my. And then the officer, as well as others who responded, failed to render aid to Mr. Hill. And so because of that, Officer Adam Coy's got some splaining to do. Now, that's just, one of many things that's going on over there on the Columbus, Ohio Police Department. And so if this is happening in the community, you can imagine what Black officers are going through on that department internally. Well, truth of the matter is you don't have to imagine, because I'm going to tell you. Black officers over in the Columbus, Ohio Police Department talk about prejudice within that department, and it isn't limited to just civilians. So this is kind of a long, involved story. I'm going to try to keep it straight, and you, along with me, will have to maybe start writing down the names of the folks involved, because there's several. There's about 4 officers who are engaged in lawsuits, one of whom recently settled, C.R.A.S.H. I'll talk to you a little bit more about C.R.A.S.H. in just a bit. He recently settled his lawsuit for $475,000. But Eric Cornett recently retired because he could. Now, he retired a couple of years sooner than he wanted to. And the reason that Eric Cornett retired, he says he had no choice. He had no choice but to leave the Columbus Division of Police. Why? Well, because a white sergeant by the name of Eric Moore, who's still on the job, Eric Moore, sergeant, still on the job, and came to the attention of Eric Cornett, Black officer, that this Sergeant Moore was calling him the N-word and a monkey. And then this sergeant threatened to actually kill Mr. Cornett. Eric Cornett was and is still very fearful. Now, he's left the department and he's moved to another state, but he is still very fearful. And here's why. He said Sergeant Moore had access to the police audio video room, and in so doing, that included Sergeant Moore having access to GPS trackers and night vision goggles. And I believe somewhere in the article I read that I think Officer Cornett said that this Sergeant Moore had GPS trackers on his vehicle, or maybe it was a city-issued vehicle and it had the GPS trackers on there. That's not really clear to me, but nonetheless, Cornett felt like Sergeant Eric Moore could know where he was at any point in time and had threatened to kill him. And so there was an investigation that was done, and it included other malfeasance and misconduct by this Sergeant Eric Moore. He was investigated for trying to purchase a lightning link. A lightning link evidently turns a weapon fully automatic. Now, why Sergeant Moore needs a fully automatic weapon, I don't know. But he was investigated for that. And with all of that, Sergeant Moore remains on the job. And so Eric Cornett, Black man, retired and is now one of the many lawsuits that is going on over there with the Columbus, Ohio Police Department. Mr. Cornett's lawsuit is currently in federal court, and he is one of 3 discrimination suits that have been filed by current and or former Black police officers. And so just last month, I was telling you that there was another officer by the name of C.R.A.S.H. who recently won a settlement. There was $475 awarded to him. City Council approved it, and the City Council approved this $475,000 settlement because they said they didn't concede any wrongdoing, but they felt like if they did not settle this, that certainly this officer, C.R.A.S.H., would get much more if he was to take this thing to a jury trial. C.R.A.S.H. was also retaliated against for reporting misconduct and malfeasance that he heard about with regards to this Sergeant Moore's racism and Moore's misconduct. So here's the backstory with this Sergeant Moore. And this is not just Sergeant Moore, understand this. This is, several officers, high up officers, and I'll mention a deputy chief who, by the way, is now the chief of police who's involved in these shenanigans as well. But the Columbus police officers have long faced criticism for their treatment of Black civilians and Black police officers. There was a killing of an 11-year-old by the name of Tyree King, fatal shooting of Henry Green, the stomping of DeMarco Anderson, and the beating of another student by the name of Joseph Hines. These are all civilians who have been either killed or hurt seriously by the Columbus Police Division officers. And so now we can add to that list Andre Maurice Hill, who was recently shot and killed, and then Corey Goodson Jr., who was shot back on December the 4th, but by the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. So city, county, they're all, same, seemingly. Now the mayor over there, his name is Andrew Ginther, and he has expressed faith in his police chief, Chief Quinlan. And I'll tell you why, he may have faith in Chief Quinlan, but I don't. The department wouldn't discuss the pending lawsuits because that's what they always do. They say that, we can't talk about anything that's pending, but we can tell you that in the case of Carl Shaw, who was facing retaliation, despite him having gone through the proper channels, despite the fact that, he's telling about this Sergeant Moore's racist comments and antics, Moore was given a written reprimand. Shaw and another officer were discouraged from reporting on Sergeant Moore's shenanigans. This was not a good situation, and so the city decided to go ahead and settle with Shaw, $475,000. Now, the thing about Shaw is that he was partners with Cornett. Cornett is the guy who I first mentioned to you when I started talking about this, who left a couple of years sooner than he wanted to. But Shaw and Cornett were partners, and they worked together for more than 20 years. And part of what they alleged in their various lawsuits is that, they were retaliated against for speaking out. They also said that part of the retaliation looked like this. Sergeant Moore seemingly is their supervisor, and it sounds to me like they might work in a narcotics unit. And so Sergeant Moore was their supervisor, and that it was not uncommon for Sergeant Moore to decline giving Cornett and Shaw and other black officers proper equipment to go out and do what it was that they needed to do. That was one of the things. That's one of the ways that Sergeant Moore would retaliate. And so, I often talk about ways in which a department can touch you and do things to you. It is very difficult to prove or get others to believe or buy into the fact that this is retaliation. So withholding proper equipment was one thing that happened. Officer Cornett said that he had heard secondhand information that this Sergeant Moore was using racial slurs and making racial jokes about Cornett, and then, of course, threatened to kill Cornett and another officer by the name of Williams. Both of these officers, Cornett and Williams, who I'll introduce you to in just a little bit, both of these officers allegedly had a tracking device put on their car. Now, Sergeant Moore is a white guy, and it seems like there was another supervisor in that unit. Again, it sounds like a narcotics unit, and this other supervisor's name is Sergeant Douglas Williams. Sergeant Douglas Williams allegedly was told by Sergeant Moore that Moore wanted to, quote, take their monkey asses out back and kill them. Now, this is what Sergeant Moore, a white man, said to Sergeant Douglas Williams, a black man, about Cornett and Shaw. I want to take their monkey asses out back and kill them. These comments are attributed to Sergeant Moore in various lawsuits, and there was a memo, I guess, back and forth between some folks, because, sometimes people get real stupid and they write stuff down. And so there was a memo where Sergeant Moore is alleged to have said this. And when asked why Sergeant Moore was so pissed off with Sergeant Williams, the black man, Moore said, because if that monkey had taken care of the other monkey, if that monkey, Sergeant Williams, had taken care of the other monkey, Cornett and or Shaw, this would have been taken care of. Now, what Sergeant Moore, the white man, wanted Sergeant Williams to do to the other two black officers, Shaw and Cornett, I don't know. But that was the comment. If he would have taken care of those other two monkeys, this wouldn't be going on. And so again, there was another, big internal affairs investigation. And some of these investigations go back to 2015. Now, during one of those such investigations, it was found that Moore was guilty of misconduct. Had nothing to do with the monkey comment or the N-word comment. They said that Moore misused his equipment. He had been deceptive with investigators. Now, deceptive with investigators sounds like lying to me. So I don't know how he's able to still be a supervisor, let alone a police officer, once he's been found guilty of false and misleading. That's the other way it's referred to. Can't go to court and testify. So anybody out there, if you've got Sergeant Eric Moore's name on something, he's been found guilty of being deceptive with investigators. That might get you a get out of jail free card. I'm just saying. Sergeant Eric Moore was also found guilty of filing a bogus overtime slip. In other words, theft of funds, theft of city salary. Yet he's still on the job. Did I say he was still on the job? Sergeant Eric Moore was also found guilty of using racially derogatory language. If that monkey had taken care of the other monkey, this wouldn't be going on. Sergeant Eric Moore also disobeyed an order and then failed to, quote, fairly and equitably fill out a narcotics post. All of these allegations of misconduct were sustained. The things that Internal Affairs didn't sustain were the allegations against the black officers. Could not sustain those allegations. But listen, you got this guy lying. You got him stealing money. You got him filling out false reports. And remember, Sergeant Eric Moore is still on the job. He was terminated for a time, but because of the power of the unions and arbitration, took a couple of years, but he was eventually reinstated. And I would imagine since it took 2 years, he was probably reinstated with back pay as well. The power of the unions. So because of all this, Eric Cornett said, you know what, I am out of here. So he quit. He's concerned still about his safety and that of his wife. She has since got a concealed carry permit, or a permit to carry in Texas. I guess it doesn't have to be concealed. That's where they live. And he's still very much concerned as he continues through this litigation that's ongoing. And so while all of this was going on, there was another white officer who was privy to this, and his name is C.R.A.S.H. So I'm adding another character to this tale of woe. This C.R.A.S.H., I'm assuming he's an officer because they don't give me his rank, but C.R.A.S.H. knew about the shenanigans of Sergeant Moore, and Sergeant Eric Moore was a little miffed with C.R.A.S.H. for not getting on board and co-signing to his BS. And because of that, C.R.A.S.H. said, hey, there's problems on the CDP, and, Moore is misusing equipment, and he's stealing money from the city and getting paid for time that he hasn't worked. C.R.A.S.H. told all of this to CNN, and somehow word got over to the deputy chief, Thomas Quinlan, the same guy who is now the police chief, right? He's now the police chief. But when he was the deputy police chief, Thomas Quinlan had told C.R.A.S.H., hey, dude, stand down. He warned C.R.A.S.H. that if he pursued any complaint against Sergeant Moore, that C.R.A.S.H. would himself be faced with allegations for failing to tell that Sergeant Moore had done this nasty deed in a timely manner. So forget, C.R.A.S.H. is now threatening, delete that. So now C.R.A.S.H. is being threatened for not reporting on Sergeant Moore, who everybody knows is a jackass, right? That's why we don't need no National Registry folks. They already know who these people are. Everybody knows on that department, including then Deputy Chief, now Chief of Police, Thomas Quinlan, that Sergeant Eric Moore is a problem. And because C.R.A.S.H. wanted to speak on it, the Deputy Chief told him, you too can get this work. And so C.R.A.S.H. did. He wound up speaking out, and he was faced with an internal affairs investigation of his own. C.R.A.S.H. was also accused of misusing department equipment and, of course, failing to report on Sergeant Moore's misdeeds in a timely fashion. And so they pretty much ran C.R.A.S.H. out on ahead. Delete that. They pretty much ran C.R.A.S.H. out on a rail. And so when I say, fish rots from the head, bullshit starts at the top, top being chief down, bullshit starts at the top. Police Chief Thomas Quinlan knows exactly who he has on his department. He knows who the errant officers are. And this is the same police chief that the mayor says he has confidence in to investigate the fatal shooting of unarmed Andre Maurice Hill by Officer Adam Coy. I don't have that same confidence, Mayor. I just don't. And the reason that C.R.A.S.H was run out on a rail is because he went against that blue wall. He spoke up. C.R.A.S.H said back then that, quote, the whole atmosphere of Columbus Police in my 25 years, it's a really big deal to report somebody. It's pretty much known that if you do that, you're going to be the rat and it's not going to go well for you. And because C.R.A.S.H spoke out before he eventually left the department, he spent 2 months in, I call it purgatory. They have a term for it, 580. 580 is, a place where they send you, I jokingly say, with a box of paper clips and tell you to count them. And then when you get done, count them again. And so before they ran him out, they put him in this 580. Now, C.R.A.S.H not the only person who spent some time in 580 because one of the other officers before he was fired also spent a little time in 580. C.R.A.S.H eventually left the department, and him and his wife not only left the department, but they left Columbus and now are in North Carolina. C.R.A.S.H too filed a lawsuit against the Columbus Division of Police. His case has been dismissed. But let me get back to the settlement that occurred, $475,000 settlement that occurred with C.R.A.S.H, because C.R.A.S.H didn't leave. He stayed on the department and he said he wasn't going to leave. And the only reason that he accepted the $475,000 is because it also included, and I think this was very savvy on his part, but it included that the city should now reclassify discrimination as a fireable offense. So going forward, because of C.R.A.S.H's settlement, anyone who's found guilty of discrimination on that department could be fired. The city council again approved this caveat to that $475,000 settlement because, according to the Solicitor General Richard Coglanese, the city was facing a much higher damage award to Shaw if they took that thing to trial. And so Shaw said, listen, he said, I stuck around just to prove a point that they were not going to run me off. I think it hurts them sometimes that I come to work every day and do my job. But C.R.A.S.H is still there. He's still there fighting. And so when I tell you the Columbus Police Division is a whole mess, there's more. There's another police officer by the name of Kevin Morgan. Now, he was a veteran patrol officer, 46 years old. He's black. He was relieved of duty and then fired back in 2015. Now, Kevin Morgan denied the allegations that were leveled against him. The prosecutor over there declined to prosecute Kevin Morgan on any charges. And before he quit or was fired, he too, Kevin Morgan, was placed in that 580, much like C.R.A.S.H. Remember purgatory, the place where they give you the box of paper clips and tell you, go count them. Well, Kevin Morgan is also one of those 3 lawsuits that I mentioned earlier for discrimination. And then there's a black woman. She's the highest ranking black woman on that police department. Her name is Lieutenant Melissa Mcfadden. She's one of 2 women holding that rank. Now, she spent at least 2 years fighting with the department regarding retaliation and racial discrimination. And she too was sent over to a place with a box of clips and told them to count them. It says that in March of 2017, several months after Lieutenant Melissa Mcfadden had helped another officer with a grievance, Mcfadden found out that one of her white commanders had asked other officers to come forward with complaints against Lieutenant Mcfadden. And it's reported that at least 4 officers obliged this white commander and came up with all of these allegations that she had created a hostile work environment, and it was investigated by Internal Affairs. None of the allegations could be proven. However, Lieutenant Mcfadden for a time was stripped of her supervisory role and placed over in the property room, She didn't have to count paper clips, but what they did have her do was she was ordered to re-outfit about 1,000 old bulletproof vests and to remove the insignias from old uniforms. So that's what they were paying this black woman, Lieutenant Mcfadden, lieutenant salary, to take the insignia off of uniforms and re-outfit bulletproof vests until there was some kind of a process, and eventually she was restored to her duties as a supervisor. Well, it took about a year, and during that time, the police chief had recommended that she be fired. Now, she wasn't fired. She's still on the job, and she's been there for some time doing, this work, fighting on behalf of herself and others. It's reported that local media got a copy of this internal affairs report that alleged that Lieutenant Mcfadden had created this hostile work environment and that she, quote, embraced a black militancy mindset. Yeah, all of that could not be proven. She was never disciplined, but I'm sure it was very difficult for her to be placed in a position that was so far beneath her rank. No doubt embarrassing for others to know that she had been stripped and put in a room and told to count bulletproof vests, stripped of her duties until she was eventually restored. And having gone through all of that, she says that retaliation continues. And so she too is filing or is in the midst of litigation. Now, you've heard me talk about stick time, and I've said that, officers, there are a contingency of officers out there who live for this on the LAPD. Well, Lieutenant Mcfadden talks about this culture on her police department as well. And she says that officers revel in brutality. And somehow she was able to get some information from a Facebook group. So this private Facebook group said, quote, fuck Hardin, Beatty, and Governor Mike DeWine. And they also were wishing for, quote, a fist up the ass of Mayor Andy Ginther. These are the posts that were in this private Facebook group of these CDP officers. And the reason that they, were pissed off is because, they were saying and doing things that were contrary to what they thought they should be allowed to do in the midst of a protest. And then another officer chimes in, very well said. Another officer writes, I suppose that idiot Beatty, Hardin would rather have had a nightstick wrapped around their skulls instead of mace. These people are a friggin' joke. This is how they were bantering back and forth in this private Facebook group. And so it just goes and speaks to the mentality of the officers that are out there on patrolling the streets. You guys are dealing with them over there in Columbus. You guys know when they stop you, you might get Billy Badass. And so that's why I say comply and complain, live to survive that police encounter, go home and make a complaint. On paper, you may not get the result that you want because understand at the helm is Police Chief Quinlan, the same guy who got one of his own, a white officer, C.R.A.S.H, because he spoke up truthfully about a white sergeant, Eric Moore, who's a racist and still on the department. So this has been going on a long time over there on Columbus. This is nothing new. There was a federal judge who agreed with a class action claim back in 1985. And following the ruling, there were a number of black officers who were then tripled by 300 because there were so few officers on that department. And so because of the consent decree, they increased the number of officers. That didn't last for very long because last year it was reported that there are now fewer than 200 of the city's 1,878 sworn officers who are actually black, according to an annual report. So again, consent decree, judge agrees, the department is forced to hire more blacks, 300 more. Fast forward from 1985 to now, they've figured out a way to get rid of 200 of them. Some of them we know have left of their own volition, and others have just retired because they were tired of the BS. It's reported that the city and the feds in 2002 reached another resolution, and then Mayor Michael Coleman had promised that new citizen complaints procedure would be enacted. There would be an enhanced use of force policy. There was a commitment to prohibit racial profiling and the installation of cameras in police cruisers. Well, again, that's all great and good. It sounds sexy, but it doesn't make a difference to have cameras installed when you have officers who don't turn them on, much like in the case of the fatal shooting of Andre Hill. And so problems continue to plague the division. It's reported that 51% of the officers on that department have experienced discrimination at some point or another. And there was a third-party review last year who said the residents of Columbus, Ohio, also felt that police discrimination was a problem in the community. Columbus is described as 60% white, yet its law enforcement personnel are 87% white, and recruits are 79% white, according to a 2019 annual report. So you understand why things are not getting any better over there. Diversity really isn't anything that they seem to have an appetite for, at least not for long. But there's good news. Public Safety Director Ned Pettis purports to be committed to diversity on the department. And so for those of you who live in Columbus, Public Safety Director Ned Pettis is a name you need to know, someone you need to follow up with, someone you need to have a conversation with regarding not only diversity, but officer accountability. It's reported that there was a recent cadet class, and this particular class is predominantly women and minorities. My hope is that this majority cadet class of minority and female recruits doesn't end up having them weed these officers out somewhere in the process, or better yet, on probation once they graduate, because you're not vested, you're not safe until you get off probation. So we'll have to keep an eye on Columbus, Ohio, family. It's a hot mess over there. Be safe. Over in San Francisco, there's a police officer who's facing multiple charges of felony battery for a 2019 incident. This occurred at Pier 39, and the officer involved is Terrence Strangle. He's been charged with battery, assault with a deadly weapon, assault likely to cause great bodily injury, and assault under the color of authority. And so what happened is, on October 7th, 2019, there was an encounter with C.R.A.S.H, who suffered cuts and a broken wrist and leg at the hands of this officer, Strangle. Now, C.R.A.S.H, at the end of all of that, he was never arrested for anything and wasn't charged with anything. This is one of those rare times when an officer puts hands on you and he doesn't actually charge you. Or maybe he did charge him and it just was a DA reject. I'm not really clear. But nonetheless, now this officer, a year or so later, is facing felony battery charges. And then he's not the only one that's in jeopardy over there. Last month, I believe this is the prosecutor Boudin. Boudin's office is also filing manslaughter charges against another former police officer, Christopher Samoya, who fatally shot an unarmed black man, Keita O'Neill. He was 42 at the time. That occurred in 2017. And then a grand jury recently indicted Christopher Flores, Officer Christopher Flores, in connection with the 2019 Mission District officer-involved shooting that left another unnamed, unarmed man in critical condition. So that's it, family. A lot going on. Nothing has changed. This is it for 2020. It's a wrap. Stick a fork in it and me. Woo! I'm done. Now I need you to do your part in 2021. Hold these elected officials accountable. I've given you some names to make note of and to be on the lookout for when an opportunity presents itself. Or shoot, don't even wait. Get an email address, get a telephone number, find a Twitter account, and reach out to these people and find out how and when they're going to hold these errant officers on these various police departments accountable. Closed mouth doesn't get fed, family. If we don't ask, if we don't demand, we can't get mad when this stuff continues to occur. Wishing everybody a safe and happy New Year, and I will see you next year. Be good. Be safe.
You have been listening to the Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, produced by the Get Global Network. Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey is a television commentator, social justice advocate, and is also well known for her book, Black and Blue, Creation of a Social Advocate. an autobiography of her 20-year career as a black woman on the Los Angeles Police Department. The book details what she learned as an LAPD insider. Sergeant Dorsey can be contacted through her website, CherylDorsey.com, or via any of her social media sites like YouTube and Facebook. Take the time to subscribe to her YouTube channel and also subscribe to this podcast via major podcast networks like iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and many others. The podcast is also available on wireless speaker systems like Alexa and Sonos.